There's things that people would probably ask you. How do I do this? How do I scale a business?
You can make so much money and still be present. A lot of us don't know how. Why? Because we're listening to voices that don't know how either. And so then we're just modeling those people. This is the saying, you are what you eat. Like, that's true in the spiritual sense. It's true in the mental sense. It's true in our physical sense. And so if people can learn to I only want to listen to voices that show me how to become what I want to be.
I'm just thinking about all the wiser decisions that I've been making and be listening more to these voices.
Go explore how they're doing it and implement it.
The Content Capitalist Podcast.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Content Capitalist Podcast. Today, my guest is somebody who you've probably heard of if you've been in the internet marketing space at all, because he's made a lot of waves for a couple reasons. Number one, making a ton of money. And then number two, losing it all and then jumping back on the bandwagon. Taylor Welch, welcome to the show.
What a great introduction. Thank you.
It's what I had at the moment's notice off the top of my head.
Perfect. It's perfect.
Taylor, there's a lot of things that people would probably ask you and they'd have questions like, how do I do this? How do I scale a business, run ads, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a lot of people who also talk about that. But I want to focus on something that really caught my attention about you. And a lot of people probably have heard about your business, traffic and funnels, and they have heard about things because you talked about it publicly, about, FTC issues, et cetera, et cetera. But there's one thing that I never heard anywhere until I met you in person. And that's about an experience you had where you heard the voice of God.
Oh, yeah.
And in respect of our time, and because I know the listeners are probably looking for something that's different, is that something you'd be okay talking about today?
Yeah, 100%. Walking on the beach when he told me what I was going to do.
Exactly. And also the conversation you had before that and how all that led up to the decision you made.
With my daughter or which one?
Yes. I think it was your wife, if I remember correctly.
Okay, yeah. So this is what I've learned sometimes just in looking back through my short history is some seasons you'll go through 10 years and it's like an hour has passed. And some seasons you'll go through an hour and 10 years has passed because there's so much going on. This was a season that there was so much going on. And so I have to make sure I'm telling you the right story. But this was in the early Q2 of 2022. We had gotten a valuation for the portfolio about a year before for it was $74 or $78 million. I'm not sure which one. We were gunning to sell for $100 million. We wanted to boost the value of the company and sell it. And I was on a walk on the beach. My wife was in an Airbnb. We had gone down to take a quick vacation. And I was raised in a kind of a Christian conservative household here in the South of the United States. But I had never really taken it that seriously. I had always just prayed because it was like meditation. You know what I mean? Like we do what we're taught to do. But this particular instance, I was specifically praying to ask God to give me direction. I wanted him to tell me what to do. And I remember one of the only times, maybe 2 or 3 times in my life, I've heard like an audible voice when I'm praying, and the voice said, you're going to give everything away and you're going to start something that is brand new. And I was taken aback by it. I was like, there's no way I'm going to do that. That is not what I'm going to do at all. At first I was like, that's can't be God because that sounds so stupid. There's no way it's God. I was like, I'm not going to do that. And he responded, the voice responded to me and he was like, there's 2 economies. There's your economy and there's my economy. Pick one. I was like, oh, this must be like actually God, because that's a really smart response. So I'll make a deal with you. If you tell my wife, I will do it. If you don't tell my wife, then I'm going to just chalk this up to me hearing voices. So I went back to the Airbnb and I found my wife. Her name is Lindsay. And I said, hey, I want some confirmation on something. I feel like God might have told me to give away the businesses, but I don't think that it was necessarily God. I'm just not 100% sure. So why don't you pray about it and see if God tells you? And she started crying. And she said, God told me that 2 weeks ago. And I said, I'm not going to tell him. You're going to have to tell him. And that was the moment I was like, I've just made a deal with God and I have to either honor the deal because he wins this one, or decide that I'm like not going to live for God. It's basically a demarcation line. So we did that. It got crazy. And it was maybe 6 months after that the FTC showed up. Which I tell people all the time, a lot of times when you're raised in a spiritual environment, you always think like obedience has an immediate gratification to it. If you're obedient, it's an immediate thing. But a lot of times, you can be obedient, your life can get temporarily, you can feel like it's worse. You have this idea of what a good life is because we don't have the right grid for it. And then I had to go through the next season where I was mad at God for telling me to do something that didn't work the way I wanted it to work, which was a whole nother story. But when we started the new companies, the FTC showed up and started investigating everything. And that was really difficult for us. And things now are just, I can't imagine would have missed out on if I wouldn't have done that. It always works out in hindsight. When you look back at the past, it's like that was the right decision. But in the moment, it was pretty tricky. That's the right story, right?
That is the right one.
Okay.
And I'll tell you what, sometimes when I first heard that, I thought to myself, I don't think that I listen enough to anything other than what I can physically see in front of me, what numbers I could crunch in a spreadsheet, what
Mhm.
data I could track using some kind of analytics tool. Like that's where 99% of my brain operates when it's got to do with business. And when you pulled that out, I thought to myself, I feel like I'm seeing just black and white compared to what's possible in business. And I
I'm
know
the
you have
same.
a
I'm the same way, by the way. I think we're all like that because we're intellectual creatures that like to figure things out. There's another story I can tell you later on that, but that was my whole life. And to be honest with you, it's still my life. And sometimes I still have to be like, what does God say about this? Because I have my spreadsheet, but I haven't asked God what to do with it. It's just a habit, working that habit out. Sorry to interrupt you.
It's okay. Why do you think that one punched through? Was it because you were more sensitive, or was it because from the other side of, let's say, the veil, there was a lot more energy or emphasis put on it?
I think we have moments in our lives that are very strategically important. If you go into like, if you want to look at life as like kind of warfare, you have battles that are important, but they're tactically irrelevant to an extent. Like you're willing to lose this battle to win the war. And then we have moments in our life where what you do and what you say is very, very, very important. It's a strategic culmination point. And a lot of times you can tell that you're in one of these things because you feel a little bit of just chaos. You feel a little bit like kind of like things are kind of not working the right way. There's death by a thousand cuts. There's just a lot of activity. Usually that means, spiritually speaking, that you're kind of in a culmination event, and what you do and how you respond is incredibly important. I think God, the God that I know and talk to is really kind to be like, you don't listen very often, but this is the moment where I'm going to get your attention. If you read the Bible, there's this guy named Moses, and one day God shows up and he sets a bush on fire. Moses has to look at it. Like you can't walk past a bush on fire that's not burning. All throughout history, there are these moments where it's just like hey, Ken, you're an important enough player, and your life is at a culmination point. I have to get your attention because if I don't and you don't listen, then you'll end up on the wrong side of the tracks. But then it's up to us to obey. The criteria of those culmination points and whether you move past them or get blocked by them is when the voice of God does show up and you ignore it, you can just get trapped in whatever season you're trying to get out of forever.
Now let's look at the flip side, though. Let's say that you said there was a few months between when you gave it all away and then when it became apparent why it was a good thing. Let's say that didn't happen. They had a multi-billion-dollar exit. Would you be like the guy who sold like 8,000 Bitcoin for a pizza, way back when, and just thought I should have held on? Like, how would you have come to the conclusion it was God or another conclusion? Because sometimes it's longer than a few months, right?
Well, it's actually probably like a year and a half. Like I kind of wrestled around with the ramifications of that decision for a while. How many times have we been saved from something catastrophic because the plane doesn't take off or our car won't start or somebody misses a meeting? There's no way to know. And this is the perplexing thing even about like physicists today. They're kind of like trying to figure out like are we on like a multiverse thing here, or is there really like action consequence that we'll never be able to go back in time and figure out? The answer is I don't know, but I do know enough now to be like, God talks to people. We're too busy to listen. So I told you that was like one of the 3 times that I'd heard like the audible voice of God. But before that season of my life, I didn't hear from God at all. Like I didn't really ever pay attention. I hear from God every day now. Like it's a practice that I've now, if I can't figure out what God wants me to do, I just do nothing. Like it's just, I don't want to, he's told me things that don't make any sense. And then in hindsight, it's like, wow, I could have really messed that up. And so pretty much every day, sometimes a few times a day, I'm checking in. I have a video on YouTube that's like, the title is How to Hear the Voice of God, the Frequency of the Holy Spirit. And I taught for like an hour and a half on here's how different people hear God's voice. And it's not always audible. Sometimes it's the frequency of your subconscious changes and matches something. And if you're present, you'll notice that. And you can tell whether a food is good or bad for you based on how you feel when you eat it and based on what it does to your body. It's the same with the voices that we consume. When we consume certain voices, you can tell that like the Spirit of God is on this thing, because it will change how you feel energetically. It will change the way your brain works. So I don't think we have time to go into that, but I don't know if it would have turned out the way that you're saying or not, but I would rather not sell for a couple $1 billion and still be able to hear what God's telling me to do than have a couple $1 billion and not have that. And that is where that's where the magic is. Like, would you rather be rich or happy? It's not a dichotomy, but most of us would choose when we're young that we would rather be rich, and most of us when we're old would rather be happy. So there's a maturation process that happens too when a person realizes what's most important. It's more important for me to hear God than it is for me to make money. But the funny thing is like I make way more money now than when I was not listening to God. It's not a dichotomy. God's not like, be poor so you can hear my voice. It's more of like the hierarchy's got to be right, and then we get to keep a lot of the stuff that we need to function well on earth as well. Does that make sense?
It totally does. It totally does. And I think, I just hit 44, or going to be 45 in 2025. And I'm just kind of, reaching that crest where I'm just thinking about all the wiser decisions that I've been making, and probably going to, be listening more to these voices as I get older.
Yeah.
I think a part of that has to do with when you're young, you feel like the money, even you're going to go through the pain of not being happy because you have a lot more life to enjoy the money later and fix the other shit, right? Whereas when you get old, you're just like, "Hey, this money's not around for very much longer, so I might as well just be happy." And that's when they start giving stuff away. That's when they paying a bunch of money to put their name on a building or something, right? It's just a different time frame. I think that really gives you perspective.
Yeah, when you realize the expendable nature of time, you just want to spend your time doing things that are good for you and good for other people. And like my kids, there's tons of stories we can talk about, but I missed the first 3 years of my daughter, and I got to experience the first year and a half of my son's life. I wouldn't have been present to experience that if I would have been running the same way I was running back then. And it's hilarious that it's even a temptation for us, because you can make so much money and still be present. A lot of us don't know how. Why? Well, because we're listening to voices that don't know how either. And so then we're just modeling those people. And what there's the saying, you are what you eat. Like, that's true in the spiritual sense. It's true in the mental sense. It's true in our physical sense. And so if people can learn to I only want to listen to voices that show me how to become what I want to be. There's a secret there. There's no greater equalizer of what's important than getting old. That's what you're talking about. Like, the older you get, like, time's not going to last forever. So what's the most important is like top of mind all the time. Have you seen those pictures that have like the weeks that you have left to live?
Yes. Yes.
I got one of those and put that up in my
Good friend
office.
Taki Moore's got one up, and
Yeah.
I did buy one, but I ended up not putting it up because, well, I can't remember. I think it just sat in the box forever after it arrived.
I got one of those. Yeah, Taki's really good at this. Like, you can tell when I got to hang out, I met Taki for the first time in Fiji. I was like, oh, this guy knows how the game is played. Not the game, just the business, although he's a brilliant business person, but he kind of knows, like, what's the point of life if you get rich and don't live? People die way too soon,
I'm going to read you a tweet that really caught my attention. You don't like it when it's small. You're not going to like it when it's big. You're not going to want it when it's big. That's something you put out. Is this kind of what you're talking about here?
Yeah. If the business doesn't feel like it's what you want to be known for when it's small, you have no point and no business making it big. It's just the bigger it is, the more of a monster it's going to become.
I got one more. Can I read it to you?
All right.
Let me hear your
Yeah, let's
thoughts on it. Marketers talk about being honest in their marketing. Then their marketing breaks a dozen compliance rules and you realize they're confused. Honesty is not the bar. It's way higher than that. You remember that?
No. When was that?
This was February. 2024 this year?
I don't remember what I was thinking about or doing, but it's talking about honesty and just honesty in terms of, it's like even the FTC they don't really pay that much attention to even whether something, they want it to be true. They don't want you to they don't want you to describe something you're doing, like, but what they're really interested in is the impression that you give for what it means for other people. They call it net impression. It's like, actually, I think it's a pretty good rule actually. But if you're gonna bring people over to what you're doing, they don't just have to trust that you're being honest with them. They have to trust that they align with you, which is where people really get brand explosion, is when people align with that person. Because I could just say, hey, we've made 80 million, 100 million, whatever dollars, and people are like, oh, that's pretty cool, I'm gonna follow this person. But following does not equate trust. People trust what they align with and what they feel like is in their best interest long term. I was probably thinking around something like that. February was like a decade ago, it feels like, though. So long ago.
So what's the next barb of honesty? I want to go a bit deeper into that. You said there's alignment, right? And are we talking more about alignment in your marketing message for FTC compliance and more in terms of like, okay,
No. Like, so let's say that me and you run identical businesses and our companies sort of do the same thing for people. You have kids and I have kids, but you never talk about having kids. So there's alignment just if I talk about having kids. There's alignment because personality is now a legitimate data set for brands. If you look at Elon and Tesla and to an extent even Zuckerberg and Meta, like, these brands used to just run off of P&Ls and cost of future revenue. There's a multiple in there for just personality alignment, and the political structure of America has made that 10 times more important. So if they believe that you stand for something that the other competitors don't stand for, now they're trusting you even further. That requires you to take a stance from time to time. Let's take it a step further. We have two identical businesses and we both have kids and we both talk about kids, but I talk about the times when I've screwed up with my kids and how I've learned to do it better. That's another tier, because now they're like, Ken's never done it wrong. So I feel a little uncomfortable. Maybe he's lying. And these conversations are happening in the back. Those copywriters are the best at entering inside of those conversations naturally. So vulnerability is a way that you can really create this wonderful moat of brand alignment with people. If you look online and you see people like Alex Ramosi, Alex and Layla are incredible. But Alex has this really unique and interesting way of being vulnerable that doesn't make him look like an idiot. He'll talk about how his early days were hard and people were like, that's where I am right now. I feel exactly what he felt then. I feel that right now. I'm going to follow Alex. This is the vulnerability takes it up a notch. So there are tiers of like where people see themselves. Do they see themselves being like you? Do they see themselves being like Taki? Do they see themselves being like Ramosi? And all of these people were all different. And the more that we share with the world, the more opportunity there is for alignment. But the danger and why people don't do this well is because the more you share, the more opportunity there is for misalignment as well. So you can tell the people who just play it real safe. And then you can tell the people who are like me, or I'm just like, this is my real life. I messed this up a million times. Don't do what I did. I learned how to do it better. And people are like, that's who I want to follow because he's honest, but not just base table stakes honesty. Like, it's not like he's honest, I don't believe he's lying. It's like, he's honest, I can see myself in his story, therefore I align with it. Does that make sense?
it does. Absolutely. I want to wrap this up with a question.
Yeah.
And I like to end with a question from you to the listener. And I know you've mentored, coached, consulted a lot of business owners. If you're to ask a question to someone who's listening, who's going to be someone who sells information or IP with courses, with coaching, with mentorship, and this question is going to help them unlock the next level. I know that's a lot to throw on you at the last minute here, but it's something they could take internally, think about. What would that question be?
All right, hold on, let me think. If you continue living the way you're living and building the way that you're building, what regrets do you have the night before you die?
That's a big one.
And then go and fix those regrets so you no longer have them.
That's a big one. I'm going to take that. Taylor, thank you so much for that. I want to respect your time. You're a busy guy. I do appreciate what you shared with us during this 25 minutes. Is there anything else that you want to add in here to an aspiring online business owner who's just struggling, or they're stuck at 1 million or stuck at 5 million, whether it's your story that's going to encourage them or or just full on drill sergeant on them? I don't know what that's going to be. Is there anything you can share?
I would just say find the people that you want to model and get around them. Pay to get around them if you need to. Most of the times you're going to need to. That's why I have different projects that pay me varying degrees of money. I don't have to do like consulting anymore, but I'm really, really motivated by helping unlock people's monetization abilities without sacrificing the things that everyone else is telling them they have to sacrifice. Because it's a false dichotomy, which really means you don't actually have to choose. That requires education. More options requires more education. So just get around them. Like if you like me, get around me. Go to our website, find events, come to an event, come hang out. There's a osmosis of energy that is super powerful. And don't quit, but those are all the platitudes. Like if you want to actually grow, get around these people who you believe are not full of it. They're actually doing what they say they're doing. Go explore how they're doing it and implement it.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And everybody else who's watching or listening, thanks for watching all the way to the end. Check out the link down below for Taylor Welch, his website, and his social media links. And for everybody else, if you enjoyed this, please do share this with somebody else you know is going to appreciate this content. That's it for now, and I'll see you next week.
No hustle worship here, we're a different breed. Action is what we got if action is what you need. Content capitalists, we're breaking the mold. Cause the old ways fading, new stories to be told. So content capitalists, get to the prize.